So today we're going to be discussing a continuation, a little bit more about the golden calf, and then we're going to go on to continue explaining the Mishnah. So let me share the screen and we'll jump right in. Let's start with the blessing. Baruch atah
Adonai,
Adonai
Eloheinu,
Eloheinu melech
melech haolam,
haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu al divrei Torah. The Gemara cites a medrash on the following verse from Isaiah relating to the sin of the golden calf and Moses' supplication for forgiveness. But Zion said, Zion refers to the Jewish people, the Lord has forsaken me and the Lord has forgotten me. And God responds, can a woman forget her suckling baby, that she would not have compassion for the child of her womb? These may forget, but you I will not forget. So the Gemara seems to seeks to clarify. We said the Lord has forsaken me and the Lord has forgotten me. Is that the same or is that different? Forsaken seems to be the same as forgotten. So if they're synonymous, why are we repeating the same idea twice? Reish Lakish, who we learned about on the Wednesday class last week, Reish Lakish said, the community of Israel said before the Holy One, blessed be He, Master of the universe. Even when a man marries a second wife after his first wife, he certainly recalls the deeds of his first wife. Yet you not only have forsaken me, but you have forgotten me as well. So there's a difference between forsaking and forgetting. The Holy One, blessed be He, responded to Israel, my daughter. I created 12 constellations in the firmament, and for each and every constellation I have created 30 armies. And for each and every army I have created 30 legions. And for each and every legion I have created 30 infantry division leaders. And for each and every infantry division leader I have created 30 military camp leaders. And for each and every military camp leader I have created 30 leaders of forts. And in each and every leader of a fort I have hung 365,000 stars, corresponding to the days of the solar year. And all of them I have created only for your sake. And you said the Lord has forsaken me and the Lord has forgotten me? Who wants to do some math over here?
Well, I have two questions.
Go ahead.
The first is, what is the significance of 30? And the second is, we go by the lunar year. So why is he talking about the solar year?
Those are both very good questions. The answer to the first question is easier. Usually, if you have the number 30 or 300 in the Talmud, it is often a message that this is not to be taken as a literal number, but rather as just saying, like, I saw a camel that was as big as the sky, right? That we're talking about a lot. Sometimes it is an accurate number, so you just have to know whether it's to be taken literally or not. And in this scenario, I don't know for sure. About the three, why are we talking about the days of the solar year and not the days of the lunar year? That's a good question, and I don't know the answer. But let's do some math for the fun of it. Should we do some math over here? I've got my calculator out. Okay, we have 365,000 of the stars times 30 liters of the fort. So each fort was 365,000 stars times 30 liters of forts. Times, that's already close to 11 million. Then each fort, meaning there are...
No, Rabbi, you're not doing
Sorry?
that. It's
Say
not
again?
30 liters of port. It's you're forgetting all the multiples that came before that.
That's where we're going to next. So the leader of the forts, on top of the leaders of the forts, is 30 military camp leaders. And how many infantry divisions are there? There are 30 infantry divisions. And how many legions are there? There are 30 legions. times 30 armies times 12 constellations. It's more than my calculator can handle.
It's 30 to the power of 1,
But it's
2, 3, 4. It's 30 to the power of 4 times 365,000.
right. So that would be a little over 291 million times 365,000. Whatever. A lot of stars. And and God is saying, I created all the stars in the heaven just for you. And you're telling me that I've forgotten about you? The verse goes on to say, can a woman forget her suckling baby that she would not have compassion for the child of her womb? These may forget, but you I will not forget. The meaning of this verse is that the Holy One, blessed be He, said to the community of Israel, have I forgotten the ram offerings and firstborn animals that you offered before me in the desert? So then the Jewish people got worried and they said, Master of the universe, if there is no forgetfulness before the throne of your glory, perhaps you will also not forget my sin of the golden calf. And God responded to Israel, these too shall be forgotten. These is a reference to the sin of the golden calf, regarding which Israel said, these are your gods. So then the Jewish people got nervous again. And they said, Master of the universe, if there is forgetfulness before the throne of your glory, and there are things that you overlook and don't remember about actively, perhaps you will also forget the events revolving around the revelation at Sinai. And God said to Israel, I, Anochi, will not forget you, which refers to the revelation at Sinai, beginning with Anochi, Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. Mark your calendars for June 2nd, Monday afternoon, 6 p.m., where we will be receiving the Torah once again. Here at Chabad Central Proud with the reading of the Ten Commandments and a dairy buffet. The Gemara notes, that is what Rabbi Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Shaya when he explained this verse. What is the meaning of that which is written, these two will be forgotten, is talking about the sin of the golden calf that God says I will not be paying attention to. And what is the meaning of I will not forget you is referring to the events that transpired at Sinai. Okay. Back to the Mishnah. We learned in the Mishnah that the early generations of pious men would wait 1 hour in order to achieve the correct frame of mind appropriate for prayer. And the Gemara asks, where did we learn that from? Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said this is alluded to when the verse states, happy are those who dwell in your house. What does it mean, people who dwell in your house? It means people who sit around. And what are they sitting around doing? They weren't sitting around and chatting. They were sitting around to get into the appropriate frame of mind. And after that, it says they will praise you, Selah. So first, they sit in the house, and after sitting in the house, do they begin the praise. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, one who prays must also wait an hour after prayer. As it is stated, surely the righteous will give thanks unto your name. The upright will sit before you, meaning that first we give thanks unto God's name, referring to prayer. And then we will sit before you in the synagogue after prayers to sit and meditate over what we have done. That opinion was also taught in Hebraisa. One who prays must wait an hour before his prayer and an hour after his prayer. From where is it derived that you have to wait 1 hour before prayer, as it is stated, happy are those who dwell in your house? And from where is it derived that one may stay an hour after prayer, as it is written, surely the righteous will give thanks unto your name, the upright will sit before you. So now, let me ask you, how many times a day do we pray?
3.
3. How many hours for these pious men was each prayer?
Well, it's 1 hour before and 1 hour after.
Right? And then we learned also that they had an hour of prayer also.
So it's 3 hours.
Yeah. So how many hours a day were they spending for prayer?
9 hours.
And how many hours are there in the day?
24.
24. So you have to also sleep and you have to also eat and you have to also learn Torah. And 9 hours of the day That's longer than a regular average workday. Regular workday is 9 to 5. These people were praying for 9 hours. So what's your question?
And you eat and sleep and work.
How did they get anything done? Yeah, the DMV is only open certain hours, right? The sages taught in a brisa with regard to waiting before and after prayer. The early generations of pious men would wait an hour, pray an hour, and then wait an hour again. This raises the question: if they would spend 9 hours a day engaged in prayer or the requisite waiting periods before and after prayer, 3 hours each for morning and afternoon and evening prayers, how is their Torah preserved? If you don't spend time studying, how are you going to remember what you learned? There was little time remaining to review their studies. And how was their work accomplished? How'd they pay their bills?
Is this referring only to like the priests of the temple, or the average working schmo who had to plow his fields?
This is referring to the pious men. I don't know whether they were working in the temple or not. I don't know whether they were schmoes um, who had to plow their fields. But these are people who were very special people. So do you want to give an answer? What do you think? How did they get their work done?
Women do it.
Okay, let's see what the Gemara answers. Rather, because they were pious, they merited that their Torah was preserved and their work was blessed. That even with a little bit of study, they wouldn't forget, and with a little bit of work, they were able to pay their bills. Parenthetically, this week, Friday, Thursday night and Friday, is Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is where we learn about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It's the anniversary of his passing. And he was a man who did not spend any time in the pursuits of worldly desires. He was someone who sat and learned Torah day and night, and all of his matters were taken care of. God arranged for him. So if you trust in God, then everything will be taken care of. If you trust in God, everything will be taken care of. Now, there are many people who tried that and it did not work out for them. But for him, it worked out because he was on that level and he indeed trusted the correct way. Made a blessing already. Let's say l'chaim. Back to the Mishnah. We learned in the Mishnah, even if the king is greeting him while he's in the middle of prayer, he should not respond to him as one may not interrupt their prayers. In limiting application of this principle, Rav Yosef said, what kind of king are we talking about? We're talking about a Jewish king. Because a Jewish king would understand that the reason why the person is not responding is because he's praying, not because of disrespect. However, if it's a king who is not a Jewish king, he can interrupt his prayer and respond to their greeting, because if he won't, his head will be chopped off. The Gemara raises an objection to Rabbi Yosef's statement. One who is praying and saw a violent person feared by all coming toward him, or a carriage coming toward him and he is in the way, he should not stop his prayer, rather abridge it and move out of the way. He should just finish quickly and then move. The Gemara responds, it's not a good question. Because when should you abridge your prayer is if you have enough time to finish your prayer and complete it in time and then be able to finish. But the story with the king is a situation where you're not almost done, and so you need to just stop your prayers and do what you need to do to save yourself. The sages taught there was a related incident involving a particular pious man who was praying while traveling along his path, when an officer came and greeted him. The pious man did not pause from his prayer and did not respond with a greeting. The officer waited for him until he finished his prayer. After he finished his prayer, the officer said to him, "You good for nothing. You endangered yourself. I could have killed you for not responding to me. Isn't it written in your Torah, take utmost care and guard yourself diligently? And it is also written, therefore take good heed unto yourselves. Why did you ignore the danger to your life? When I greeted you, why did you not respond with a greeting? Were I to sever your head with a sword, who would hold me accountable for your spilled blood? It would have been your fault for not responding to me." The pious man said to him, "Wait for me until I will appease you with my words." He said to him, "Had you been standing before a flesh and blood king, and your friend came and greeted you, would you return his greeting?" And we have now finished page 32b. The officer said, "Of course not. If I'm standing in front of the king, I'm not going to talk to anyone." The pious man continued, "And if you would greet him, what would you do?" The officer said, "They would cut off my head with a sword." The pious man said to him, "Isn't this matter an a fortiori inference? If you were standing before a king of flesh and blood, of whom your fear is limited because today he is here, but tomorrow he is in the grave, you would have acted in that way. I, who standing and praying before the supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be he, who lives and endures for all eternity, all the more so that I could not pause and respond to your greeting." When he heard this, the officer was immediately appeased, and the pious man returned home in peace. Isn't that a beautiful story?
Mhm.
Don't try it at home, unless you really feel that way. If you really feel that way, then do not stop, even if the officer is asking you how you're doing. We learned in the Mishnah that if a snake is wrapped around your heel, you may not interrupt your prayer. So before we get into what the Gemara says about this, based on what we've just learned, do you have any questions about this?
No.
Are you in danger if the snake is wrapped around your heel?
Yes.
If you're in danger, do you have to continue your prayers or can you pause your prayers?
Well,
Based on what we've learned.
you do what you do to save your life.
You do what you need to do to save your life. So why over here does the Talmud say, does the Mishnah say that if there's a snake wrapped around your heel, you may not interrupt your prayers?
Can you scroll down? I can't see that second line.
So it depends what kind of snake it is. In limiting application of the principle, Rav Shesha says they only taught this Mishnah with regard to a snake. As if one does not attack the snake, it will not bite him. But if a scorpion approaches an individual while he is praying, he must stop because a scorpion is liable to sting him even if you don't disturb it. So we're talking here about a snake that you're not that potentially could cause you harm, but you're not worried about it actually causing any difficulties. The Gemara is going to raise here a very interesting objection based on what was taught in the Tosefta. The Tosefta is talking about testimony that a person died. Why would we care if a person died? Sorry, of course we would care if a person died. Why would it matter legally if a person died?
What is a tospeta?
That's a great question. Tosefta is on the same level as the Mishnah, but not as authoritative as the Mishnah. In other words, The Mishnah is a collection of Brisas and Toseftas that were codified into the Mishnah, but it's from the same rabbis and teachers, so it's on a lower level than the Mishnah, but more authority, but holds authority, and we cannot argue with what is written in a Tosefta. Sometimes a Tosefta will add scenarios, will add context, or different things that are not brought down in the Mishnah, but we will find in the Tosefta. So why would it matter legally if a person died or didn't die? When would we need to know that?
That's work.
Sorry?
The court of law.
But why would the court need to know if the guy's dead or not? This is not a very hard question. It's just
This is, well, someone's charged with his murder. And you got to prove that you can't have a murder without I believe it's accepted that you can't prove murder unless there's a body.
fair enough, right? If there's no victim, there's no murder. Over here, we're talking about a situation where the guy died because he fell into a lion's den, or he died if he fell into a snakes and scorpions. And the two most simple reasons that we would need to know this are for the inheritance. Do his kids collect his estate or not? And can his wife get remarried or not? If he's still alive, then his kids can't take his money and his wife can't get remarried. If he has died, then we could. Usually, for any matter of to prove any matter, we need two witnesses. However, when it comes to permitting a lady to get remarried, there are often circumstances, I shouldn't say often, there are certain circumstances where we will be lenient and go based off of the probabilities. So we have a Tosefta that says as follows. If there were people who saw someone fall into a lion's den, but after that they didn't see what happened, they cannot testify that he has died. Their testimony is not accepted by the court as proof that he has died, even though he fell into the lion's den, because it's possible that they didn't eat him. If they weren't hungry, then they won't eat him. However, if they saw someone fall into a pit of snakes and scorpions, they could testify that he died, because surely the snakes bit him.
On the other hand, snake bite is not necessarily fatal. Just make you very sick. Scorpions are generally not fatal if you're a healthy adult.
I guess we're talking about poisonous snakes.
Mm.
So I had to know what kind of snake. So the Gemara responds, wow, 1 second. You're talking about a guy who fell into their pit, fell on top of them and disturbed them? So of course, because they were annoyed at him that he fell on them, then they will bite him. But a snake who's just coming and wrapping himself around your foot, he's not going to bite you. Okay. The Gemara recites another halacha stating that he must interrupt his prayer in a case of certain danger. Rabbi Yitzchak said, one who saw oxen coming towards him, he interrupts his prayer. I guess today it would be if I don't know, a car is coming towards you. But as Rav Hoshaya taught, one distanced himself 50 cubits from an innocuous ox, meaning an ox that we don't know whether it is calm or whether it is angry. An ox with no history of causing damage with the intent to injure. And from a forewarned ox, an ox whose owner was forewarned because his ox has already gored 3 times, one must distance himself until it is beyond eyeshot. If it's within your vision, then it's not appropriate to start praying because it may charge and then you'll have to stop your prayer. However, that is talking about the Amida prayer. On the other hand, if you are within eyeshot of a ox that is known to be a goring ox, you should absolutely most definitely be praying. Well, they say today everything is all mixed up. When people are praying, they're thinking about the stock market, and when they're in the stock market, they're praying. It was taught in the name of Rabbi Meir. While the head of the ox is still in the basket and he is busy eating, go up on the roof and kick the ladder from underneath you so that he can't climb up the roof after you. Shmuel said this only applies with regard to a black ox during the days of Nisan, because that species of ox is particularly dangerous, and during that time of year the Satan dances between its horns. Interesting. Rashi explains this to mean that because the winter is finished and now the ground is starting to dry out and the grass is starting to grow and he has good food, the ox will be calm and clear-minded and begin to act dangerously. With regard to praise for one who prays and need not fear even a snake, the sages taught there was an incident in one place where an arvad was harming people. It's a kind of a snake. They came and they told Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa he was a great sage and we're going to learn about him. And they asked him for his help. He told them, show me where is the hole of this snake. They showed him its hole. He placed his heel over the mouth of his hole, and the arvad came out and bit him, and the snake died. An arvad is some kind of a creature born from a snake and some kind of a lizard. Apparently, it's very dangerous. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa placed this snake over his shoulder and brought it to the study hall. And he said to everyone who was there, you see, it is not the arvad that kills a person, it is the transgression that kills a person. And if you are like me, free of transgression, then it will die instead of you. At that moment, the sages said, woe unto the person who was attacked by an arvad, and woe unto the arvad that was attacked by Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. New Mishnah. This Mishnah speaks of additions to the standard formula of the Amidah prayer and the blessings in which we incorporate those additions. One mentions the might of rains by reciting, he makes the wind blow and the rain fall. In the second blessing of the Amidah prayer, the blessing which ends off about the revival of the dead. And the request for rain, which is when we say, and grant dew and rain as a blessing, is in the ninth blessing of the Amidah prayer, the blessing of the years. The prayer of distinction at the end of the Shabbos and the festivals, between the holy and the profane, recited in the evening prayer following Shabbat and festivals, we say in the fourth blessing of the Amidah, which ends off, who graciously grants knowledge. Rabbi Akiva says Havdalah is recited as an independent fourth blessing between the third blessing and the fourth blessing. Rabbi Eliezer says it is recited in the 17th blessing of the Amidah prayer, the blessing of thanksgiving. Says the Gemara, now we're going to get into a conversation about the rain. We mention rain twice. One when we mention it in the beginning, and again, if you remember, the first three blessings are talking about us extolling God and his ways. And then we have 16 blessings requesting of God, and then 3 blessings at the end praising God. So we mentioned the might of the rains in the second blessing of the Amidah, the blessing of the revival of the dead. And the question is, why do we speak about the might of rain? So we're going to also discuss why is it called the might of rain. So not just we mentioning rain, but why are we mentioning rain specifically in the blessing of the revival of the dead, that when Mashiach comes, God will revive the dead? What do you guys think?
About what?
Why are we talking about rain? Why are we adding it specifically in the blessing that talks about the revival of the dead?
Well, rain makes things grow from out of the ground.
Very good. Let's
So
see. Rav Yosef said, because the might of rains is equivalent to the resurrection of the dead, as rain revives new life in the plant world, therefore it was inserted in the blessing of the revival of the dead. And we also learned in the Mishnah that the request for rain, when we're actually asking for rain, is added in the blessing of the years. And that's going to be also a question. Why are we talking specifically in that blessing about rain? And Rav Yosef said, because rain is a component of sustenance. We're talking about asking God to give plentiful produce. And of course, that's where rain fits in. Rain is a component of sustenance, therefore it was inserted in the blessing of sustenance as part of a request for bountiful sustenance. We also learned in the Mishnah that Havdalah, the distinguishing between Shabbat and the weekdays, is added in the blessing of who graciously grants knowledge. So here the Gemara also asks, what is the reason that Havdalah is recited specifically in that blessing? Any ideas? Why are we putting the separation between Shabbos and the weekdays in the blessing of the God who graciously grants us knowledge?
Well, you study Torah on Shabbat, but you also study Torah on the weekdays. I don't know.
Neither do I. Let's see what the Talmud's going to answer. Rav Yosef said, Havdalah is recited in that blessing because it requires wisdom to distinguish between the two entities. In order to understand the difference between Shabbos and the weekdays, you got to have brains. Therefore, they established it in the blessing of wisdoms. The rabbis say a different reason. Because Havdalah is the distinction between the sacred and the profane, the sages established it in the blessing of the weekdays. The first three blessings of the Amidah prayer are recited both on weekdays and on the Shabbos and the festivals. But the blessing who graciously grants knowledge is the first of the blessings recited exclusively during the week. So that's when we notice in our prayer that it's no longer Shabbos, because we're saying the weekday prayer as opposed to the Shabbos prayer, which does not have this blessing. Therefore, we added in this blessing. Having mentioned the blessing of wisdom, the Gemara cites that which Rabbi Ami said regard to knowledge. Knowledge is great. And that's why it was placed at the beginning of the weekday blessings in indication of its significance. Because without knowledge and understanding, there's not much else. With regard to brains, it says somewhere in the Talmud that the brains is one thing, that if you have it, you have everything, and if you don't have it, you have nothing. Rav Ami said in praise of knowledge, great is knowledge that it was placed between two letters, two names of God. Because it says, for God of knowledge is the Lord. So knowledge becomes between God and the Lord, with God and the various names of God surrounding knowledge from all sides. And since knowledge is regarded so highly, anyone without knowledge, it is forbidden to have compassion upon him. As it is stated, for they are a people of no wisdom, so their Creator will have no compassion on them, and their Creator will not be gracious to them. If God shows no mercy for those who lack wisdom, all the more so should people refrain from doing so. And this is obviously not talking about people who were born without proper mental capacity, rather people who have the opportunity to pursue wisdom, yet refrain from doing so. Similarly, Rabbi Elazar said, great is the holy temple, as it too was placed between two letters, two names of God, as it is stated, the place in which to dwell you have made, Lord, the temple, Lord, which your hands have prepared. So the fact that we have the word Lord surrounding the temple shows that the temple is very important. Noting the parallel between these two ideas, Rabbi Elazar added and said, anyone with knowledge, it is as if the holy temple was built in his days. Knowledge was placed between two letters, and the temple was placed between two letters, signifying that they stand together. Rav Acha Karchinoo strongly objects to this approach, that being placed between two names of God accords any significance. He said, if that's the case, let's look at this verse. The verse says, God of vengeance, Lord, God of vengeance, shine forth, which would mean that revenge and vengeance is very significant. But how could you say that if we're supposed to be kind and peace-loving? He said to him, he responded, yeah, when it's appropriate, vengeance is great. In the wrong time, to be angry and to bring havoc and to exact vengeance is not appropriate and is not good at all. But when it's right, then it is great, and at times it is necessary. That is which Ula said, why are these two vengeances mentioned in a single verse? One for good and one for evil. Vengeance for good, as it is written, he shined forth from Mount Paran, with regard to God's vengeance against the wicked. Vengeance. So that is when it's good, when it's against the wicked people. But vengeance could be evil, as it is written, God of vengeance, Lord, God of vengeance, shine forth with regard to the punishment of Israel. And when God is punishing the Jewish people, that is when we don't want the vengeance to be there. We had a dispute about where to put this blessing of separating between the sanctified and the profane, between the Shabbos and holidays, and between the weekday. And there was a discussion, three different opinions of where to put it. Do you put it in the middle of the fourth blessing? Is it its own independent fourth blessing before the regular fourth blessing? Or do we put it in the blessing of Thanksgiving? Regarding this, Rav Shemen, the son of Abba, said to Rabbi Yochanan, now, since the 18th blessings of the Amidah prayer and the other prayer formulas for prayer were instituted for Israel by the members of the Great Assembly, just like all the other blessings and all the other prayers were, all the sanctifications and all the Havdalahs. So why are we having this discussion at all? Let us see where in the Amidah prayer did the members of the Great Assembly institute to recite Havdalah. Right? Isn't that a great idea? Rabbi Yochanan replied that that would be impossible because the customs associated with Havdalah went through several stages. He said to him, initially, during the difficult early years of the Second Temple, they established that Havdalah should be recited in the Amidah prayer. Subsequently, when people became wealthy again, they established that Havdalah should be recited over a cup of wine. Then when people became impoverished again, they established it again to be in the Amidah prayer. But they said that if you recite Havdalah in the Amidah prayer, if you are able to, if you have wine at home, you must also recite Havdalah over a cup of wine as well. So because it was back and forth between the Jewish people having money for wine, not having money for wine, being able to say Havdalah over wine or not, so there were certain times when the Jewish people had to pray and say the Havdalah in their prayers, and sometimes where they didn't. So because it was all back and forth, it was not clear when exactly Havdalah was to be recited because it wasn't always there in the prayer. It was also stated, Rabbi Chia bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the members of the greatest assembly established for the Jewish people blessings and prayers, sanctifications, and Havdalahs. Initially, they established that Havdalah should be recited in the Amidah prayer. Subsequently, when the people became wealthy, they established that Havdalah is to be recited over the cup of wine. When the people again became impoverished, they established that it was to be recited in the Amidah prayer. And they said, one who recites Havdalah in the Amidah prayer must recite Havdalah over the cup of wine as well. And it was also stated, Rabbi and Rav Yosef both said, even though you recited Havdalah in the Amidah prayer, you must recite Havdalah over a cup of wine as well. And we're going to begin a new concept, but continuing on the same theme of the different additions to the Amida prayer. And when we put them, we will continue, God willing, next week. Wishing you all a wonderful day, a happy day. I hope the weather stays nice. And
It's
God
gonna
willing, we'll see
rain.
you tomorrow.